My husband told everyone I was paranoid for suspecting he was hiding something. But when I checked our baby's daycare paperwork, I discovered he had secretly changed our child's last name, removing mine. The judge didn't take kindly to that. The sound of the front door clicking shut jolted me awake. It was past midnight, and my husband had slipped back into the house as though he were a thief returning from a secret errand. I lay still, pretending to sleep, but my heart raced. His footsteps were careful, deliberate, almost rehearsed. He didn't come to check on me or the baby. Instead, I heard the rustle of papers, the low hum of his phone screen lighting up, and then silence. That silence was louder than any confession. I wanted to ask him right then, demand to know where he had been, but I knew how it would end. He would call me paranoid, roll his eyes, and maybe even laugh. He had perfected the art of making me feel small. So I stayed quiet, but inside suspicion burned like a fever. The next morning I tried again. "You came home late," I said casually, watching his face. He didn't flinch. "Work," he replied, pouring coffee as if nothing was unusual. His tone was flat, rehearsed, the kind of answer meant to shut down further questions. I pressed a little more, asking what project kept him out so late. He sighed, set the mug down, and looked at me with that patronizing smirk. "You really need to stop imagining things. It's embarrassing." Embarrassing. That word stung. He wasn't just dismissing me, he was framing me as unstable. And the worst part? Everyone else believed him. At family gatherings, he turned my doubts into jokes. "She thinks I'm hiding state secrets," he'd say, chuckling while relatives laughed along. I sat there, cheeks burning, unable to defend myself without sounding exactly like the paranoid wife he painted me to be. My mother-in-law patted my hand once and whispered, "Men work hard, dear. Don't make trouble over nothing." Trouble. That's what they thought I was. Trouble. But I knew better. I could feel it in the way he avoided certain topics, especially when it came to our baby. Whenever I mentioned future plans, school, traditions, even something as simple as a family photo, he brushed it aside. "We'll figure it out later," he'd say, eyes darting away. Later never came. One evening, I tried to bring up the idea of adding both our last names to the baby's paperwork. It was important to me, a way of honoring both sides of the family. He froze, then quickly changed the subject, asking if I had paid the electricity bill. It was so abrupt, so calculated, that I felt a chill run through me. Why was he so determined to avoid the topic? The tension grew heavier with each passing week. I started noticing small details. Papers tucked into his briefcase, phone calls taken outside, hushed tones when he thought I wasn't listening. Once I caught him shredding documents in the garage. He claimed they were old bills, but the way he guarded them made me doubt every word. Then came the daycare form. It was early morning and I was rushing to get the baby ready. On the counter I spotted a stack of papers. One form caught my eye. It looked like enrollment paperwork. I reached for it, but before I could read the details, he swooped in, snatched it up, and shoved it into his bag. "That's nothing," he said sharply, his voice etched with panic. Panic. That was the first real crack in his mask. That moment planted a seed of determination in me. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was wrong and I had to find out what. I began keeping notes. At first it felt silly, writing down the times he came home, the calls he made, the papers he carried. But the more I wrote, the clearer the pattern became. Late nights weren't random. The phone calls always happened when I was putting the baby to bed. The papers weren't bills. They were official forms. I remember one night vividly. He left his phone on the table while he went to shower. My hands shook as I picked it up, scrolling quickly. Most messages were deleted, but one remained. A reminder email from the daycare. My stomach twisted. Why would the daycare email him directly and not me? I was the one who handled most of the baby's paperwork. I didn't confront him that night. Instead, I added it to my notes. Every detail became part of a quiet record, a secret journal of proof. It gave me strength even when everyone else thought I was imagining things. Still, the isolation was crushing. Friends told me I was overthinking. "He's a good man," one said. "Don't ruin your marriage over suspicions." I wanted to scream. How could they not see what I saw? How could they ignore the way he dodged questions, the way he mocked me in public? One afternoon I visited a close friend, hoping for comfort. As I poured out my worries, she frowned. "You sound tired," she said gently. "Maybe you just need rest." Rest. As if sleep could erase the gnawing certainty in my gut. I left her house feeling more alone than ever. But the loneliness only fueled my resolve. If no one believed me, I would believe myself. I owed that to my child. I started testing him small experiments to see how he reacted. I asked about future schools again, pretending it was casual. He stiffened, then muttered something about not rushing decisions. I mentioned family traditions like passing down my father's name. He grew cold, his jaw tight, and quickly changed the subject. Each reaction confirmed what I already knew: he was hiding something, and it was tied to our baby. The more he tried to gaslight me, the stronger I became. His dismissive words no longer broke me, they fueled me. Every smirk, every laugh at my expense, every whispered phone call, it all became evidence. And yet I kept my silence. I didn't confront him directly. I wanted him to think I was still the paranoid wife, too weak to act. Meanwhile, I was building my case, piece by piece, waiting for the right moment. Looking back, those months were some of the hardest of my life. I lived in a constant state of tension, balancing the role of mother, wife, and detective. I smiled when I had to, played along when he mocked me, but inside I was sharpening my resolve. Because deep down I knew the truth would surface. And when it did, I would be ready. I remember the exact moment my eyes landed on that line. The daycare paperwork was spread across the kitchen table, the morning light spilling through the curtains, and there it was, our baby's last name stripped of mine. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a mistake, not a typo. It was deliberate. My name, my family's legacy, erased as though it had never existed. I froze, staring at the page until the letters blurred. My hands trembled so violently I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. A rush of heat surged through me, followed by a cold wave that left me shivering. It felt as though the ground beneath me had shifted, leaving me unsteady, betrayed, and furious all at once. When he walked into the room, I held the paper up like evidence. "Explain this," I demanded, my voice shaking but sharp. He glanced at it, then at me, and instead of guilt, his lips curled into that familiar smirk. "You're overreacting," he said casually, pouring himself coffee as though nothing monumental had happened. "It's simpler this way. Less confusing for the child. Simpler." That word echoed in my head like a cruel joke. He wasn't just dismissing me, he was erasing me. My identity, my role as a mother, reduced to an inconvenience. I felt my chest tighten, anger rising like fire. "You had no right," I snapped, my voice breaking. "This is our child, not yours alone." He shrugged, sipping his coffee as if my pain was irrelevant. "You're making drama out of nothing," he muttered. That arrogance, that cold indifference fueled my rage. I couldn't let it go. That afternoon I drove to the daycare, the paperwork clutched in my hand. My heart pounded as I asked to speak with the director. She looked uneasy, glancing at the form before explaining, "Your husband submitted the change with legal documents." Everything appeared official. "Official," I repeated, my voice trembling. "I never signed anything." Her eyes softened with sympathy. "The paperwork had signatures. I assumed they were yours." The room spun. He had forged my name. He hadn't just lied. He had crossed a line that cut deeper than any betrayal I had ever imagined. My knees felt weak, but I forced myself to stand tall. "Thank you," I whispered, though my voice cracked. I walked out of that building with a storm raging inside me. That night I confronted him again. "You forged my signature," I said, holding the paper like a weapon. His eyes narrowed, but he didn't deny it. "I did what was best," he replied coldly. "You're too emotional to make rational decisions." Too emotional. Another dagger. He wanted me to believe I was unstable, incapable. But instead of breaking me, his words hardened me. I knew I needed help. The next morning I sat in a lawyer's office, the paperwork spread across the desk. The lawyer, a calm woman with sharp eyes, studied the documents carefully. "This is serious," she said firmly. "He bypassed your consent. That's not only deceitful, it's illegal." Her words steadied me. For the first time, someone validated what I felt. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't imagining things. I was a mother whose rights had been trampled. She leaned forward, her voice resolute. "You need to take this to court. Judges do not look kindly on forged signatures, especially when it involves a child." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. "I just want my child's name back. I want my place as his mother recognized." "You will," she assured me. "But you need evidence. Everything you've noticed, every detail. Write it down, gather it." I left her office with a new sense of purpose. My quiet notes, the ones I had been keeping for months, suddenly became weapons. Each entry, each observation, each odd behavior now had meaning. I spent nights at the kitchen table organizing everything. The daycare forms, the emails, the notes I had scribbled in the margins of notebooks. I even contacted the daycare staff again, asking them to confirm what they had seen. One teacher admitted she had wondered why I wasn't involved in the paperwork. Her testimony became another piece of the puzzle. Every document I collected felt like armor. I wasn't just a wife being dismissed anymore. I was a mother preparing for battle. But the process wasn't easy. He sensed my determination and grew more hostile. One evening he cornered me in the hallway, his voice low and sharp. "You're making a mistake. You'll regret this." I met his glare, my hands trembling but my voice steady. "The only mistake was thinking you could erase me." He scoffed, storming off, but I didn't flinch. His threats no longer scared me. They only confirmed I was on the right path. In the days that followed, I found myself replaying memories. Moments when he had mocked me, dismissed me, silenced me. Each recollection fueled my resolve. I thought of the family gatherings where he laughed at my concerns, the times relatives told me to trust him. They hadn't seen this side of him, the side willing to erase me from our child's life. I realized then that this fight wasn't just about a name. It was about dignity, respect, and the bond between mother and child. He had tried to strip me of all three, but I refused to let him succeed. One evening as I tucked my baby into bed, I whispered softly, "Mommy's here. Mommy will always be here." Tears filled my eyes, but they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of determination. My child would grow up knowing the truth, knowing that I fought for him. The preparation consumed me, but it also gave me strength. Each document I filed, each testimony I secured, each note I organized, it all built toward something bigger. I wasn't just gathering evidence. I was reclaiming my voice. And as I stacked the papers neatly into a folder, I felt a surge of power. For months he had painted me as paranoid, unstable, weak. But now I held proof in my hands. Proof that I wasn't imagining things. Proof that I was right. I looked at that folder and whispered to myself, "This is my weapon. This is my justice." For the first time in a long time I felt hope. The folder of evidence sat heavy in my lap as I waited for the bailiff to call our case. My palms were damp, my heart pounding so hard I thought the entire courtroom could hear it. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, gathering every document, every testimony, every note. Now it all came down to whether the judge would see through his charm and lies. When my husband walked in, he carried himself with the same smug confidence I had seen so many times before. His suit was pressed, his smile rehearsed, his eyes scanning the room as though he owned it. He even winked at me as if to remind me that he believed he was untouchable. The judge entered and the room fell silent. As the proceedings began, my husband wasted no time painting me as unstable. His voice was smooth, almost theatrical. "Your Honor," he began, "my wife has always been overly emotional. She imagines things, creates drama where there is none. I only wanted what was best for our child." I sat there, fists clenched, biting back the urge to shout. But I didn't need to. My lawyer calmly slid the daycare paperwork across the table. The forged signature stared back at the judge, undeniable and damning. The judge's expression shifted instantly. His brows furrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line. He looked at my husband with a sternness that cut through the room. "This is deceitful," he said firmly. "Disrespectful not only to your wife but to the law itself." For the first time I saw my husband's confidence falter. His smirk disappeared, replaced by a flicker of panic. He tried to speak, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. "You attempted to erase a mother's identity from her child's life. That is not simplification. That is manipulation." Watching his arrogance crumble was a moment I will never forget. It was as if the mask he had worn for so long finally cracked, revealing the truth beneath. The ruling came swiftly. The judge ordered the child's rightful name restored, declaring that my consent had been violated and my rights disregarded. But it wasn't just about the name, it was about dignity. As the words echoed through the courtroom, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I had fought and I had won. I walked out of that courtroom with my head held high. The air felt different, lighter, as though justice itself had cleared the path before me. My husband trailed behind, his steps heavy, his face pale. For once he had no words. Outside, friends and family waited. Some looked ashamed, others avoided my eyes. A cousin approached me hesitantly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I thought you were imagining things. I didn't know." I nodded, accepting her apology but realizing I no longer needed it. Their validation had once mattered to me, but now my strength came from within. I had stood alone and I had prevailed. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effects of the ruling spread. Relatives who had laughed at my concerns grew quiet. Some reached out with apologies, others stayed silent, unwilling to admit their mistake. But I didn't chase their approval. I had learned that truth doesn't need an audience, it stands on its own. One evening I sat with my baby in my arms watching him sleep. His tiny chest rose and fell, his fingers curled around mine. I whispered softly, "Your name is yours again. Mommy made sure of it." Tears filled my eyes, but they were tears of triumph, not despair. The lesson was bigger than the name itself. It was about trust, respect, and the courage to stand firm when others try to silence you. My husband's betrayal had been the spark, but the fire it lit within me was resilience. I began to see life differently. At the grocery store, when someone cut in line, I spoke up instead of staying quiet. At family dinners, when conversations turned dismissive, I held my ground. It wasn't about confrontation, it was about knowing my worth. One afternoon I visited my parents. My father, who had once told me to trust my husband, looked at me with pride. "You proved us all wrong," he said quietly. "You showed strength we didn't see." I smiled, not out of spite but out of peace. "I didn't do it to prove anyone wrong," I replied. "I did it because my child deserved the truth." The journey had changed me. I was no longer the woman who doubted herself, who shrank under laughter, who questioned her instincts. I had become someone stronger, someone who understood that silence only empowers those who seek to control. Even in small moments, the transformation showed. When my husband tried to speak to me after the ruling, his voice softer now, I listened but didn't bend. "We can move past this," he said, almost pleading. I shook my head. "You tried to erase me. That's not something you move past. That's something you learn from." His silence was answer enough. Looking back, I realized the courtroom wasn't just a place of justice. It was a place of rebirth. I walked in carrying the weight of doubt, humiliation, and betrayal. I walked out carrying strength, dignity, and clarity. The judge's words stayed with me. Manipulation has no place in parenthood. They became a mantra, a reminder that resilience is born from standing firm against deceit. And so, the betrayal that once threatened to break me became the very thing that built me. My husband's actions taught me that trust must be earned, respect must be mutual, and silence must never be forced. I found closure not in his downfall but in my rise.